to the channel of my colleague Agnes Thompson. My name is Patricia Jenkins. I will share my story with you. Subscribe to us.
My name is Patricia Jenkins, and at 74, I truly believed I had found my rhythm. My beloved husband, Arthur, had passed a decade ago, leaving me with our comfortable split-level home in the quiet, tree-lined streets of Fairview, a steady pension, and a meticulously kept rose garden that was the envy of Mrs. Gable next door. My days were a gentle tapestry of routine: morning coffee on the porch, tending to my hybrid teas and climbing roses, afternoons lost in the pages of historical biographies, and evenings spent knitting blankets for the local shelter. Life was serene, predictable, and wonderfully my own. This house, the one Arthur and I had bought when we first married, was more than just a dwelling. It was a repository of a lifetime of memories, a quiet sanctuary where I felt truly at peace. Then the phone rang, a jarring sound in the quiet afternoon. It was my youngest daughter, Bethany. Bethany, at 41, was a whirlwind of impulsive decisions and grand, often fleeting, ambitions. She had a knack for chasing dreams that shimmered brightly on the horizon, but inevitably dissolved into thin air, leaving her scrambling. This time, it was her artisan candle-making business that had, rather predictably, fizzled, leaving her in a precarious financial state. She was calling from her rented duplex across town, her voice a carefully calibrated blend of despair and feigned optimism. "Mom," she began, a dramatic sigh punctuating her plea, "I'm in such a fix. The landlord's selling the duplex, and with Liam and Chloe, I just don't know where to turn. My savings are gone, and I haven't landed a new job yet." Liam and Chloe were my grandchildren, 13 and 11 respectively. Good kids generally, though increasingly prone to fits of preteen moodiness and a certain disregard for rules, a trait I suspected they inherited from their mother. My heart, as always, went out to them. I had always been the rescuer, the one who stepped in with a steady hand and a sensible plan whenever Bethany's latest venture inevitably crashed. It was a role I played out of love, but one that had, over the years, begun to wear me thin. "What do you need, dear?" I asked, already steeling myself for the request I knew was coming, a familiar tightening in my chest. "Well," she hesitated, a calculated pause that always preceded a significant ask. "I was thinking, you have all that room here, Mom. And it's just you in that big house. Liam and Chloe could finally have their own bedrooms, and I could save up for a proper down payment. Just until I get back on my feet, you know? While I look for something stable." The words hung in the air, a chilly premonition of disruption. My meticulously ordered life invaded. My peaceful solitude shattered. But then I pictured Liam's earnest, intelligent eyes, Chloe's sweet, dimpled smile, and my resolve began to crumble. They were my grandchildren, after all, innocent bystanders in their mother's chaotic life. "For how long, Bethany?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, betraying none of the apprehensions swirling within me. "Oh, just a few months, Mom, truly. 6 months, tops. I'm already interviewing for a manager position at that new boutique downtown. This is just a temporary bridge." She sounded so earnest, so convincingly desperate. I wanted to believe her. I desperately needed to believe her. A tiny, cynical voice in the back of my mind, a voice that sounded remarkably like Arthur's, whispered, "Don't do it, Patricia. You know Bethany. Temporary has a very elastic definition with her." But I pushed it aside. She was my daughter. She needed me. And I had a large house, with 3 empty bedrooms upstairs and a finished basement. What was the harm in helping family? "All right, Bethany," I said, the words feeling heavier than they should. "You can come stay. But it's strictly temporary. And you need to be actively looking for employment, understood? This isn't a permanent arrangement." "Oh, Mom, you're an angel. Thank you, thank you, thank you." Her relief was palpable, almost overwhelming, and for a fleeting moment, I felt that familiar warmth of being useful, of alleviating a loved one's distress. I pushed away the lingering unease. This was temporary. It had to be. They arrived 2 days later, not just Bethany, Liam, and Chloe, but a veritable avalanche of their belongings. Boxes upon boxes filled with clothes, books, toys, kitchenware, and an assortment of potted plants that looked suspiciously unwell. Bethany's beat-up minivan was stuffed to the brim, and she had clearly hired a small moving van for the rest. My spacious living room, usually a quiet retreat for reading and reflection, was instantly transformed into a chaotic obstacle course. The children, fueled by the novelty of a new house, immediately began tearing into boxes, their excited shouts echoing through my once tranquil home. The initial days were, if nothing else, a testament to my patience. Liam and Chloe quickly claimed the two largest bedrooms upstairs, turning them into fortresses of gaming consoles, discarded clothing, and snack wrappers. Bethany, meanwhile, took over the guest room, but her possessions soon spilled out into the hallway, the den, and even the formal dining room. She had an uncanny ability to leave a trail of clutter in her wake, her purse on the floor by the front door, her shoes in the middle of the kitchen, empty coffee mugs accumulating on my antique mahogany end tables. My quiet mornings, once filled with the gentle clinking of my teacup and the rustle of newspaper pages, became a jarring symphony of blaring pop music from Liam's room, the relentless thrum of Chloe's video games, and the insistent, often whining, demands of hungry children. Breakfast was no longer a solitary, contemplative affair. It was a loud, messy scramble for the last bowl of sugary cereal. My kitchen, usually pristine, quickly acquired a permanent sticky film and a faint odor of stale fast food. Bethany, true to her word, did look for work. This usually involved long hours hunched over her phone, scrolling through social media or online shopping sites, occasionally punctuating her scrolling with a performative sigh about the dismal job market. Interviews were rare and always ended with a dramatic narrative about how the potential employer simply didn't understand her unique entrepreneurial spirit. Meanwhile, my utility bills began their terrifying ascent. The thermostat was constantly being adjusted to extreme temperatures, lights were left blazing in empty rooms, and the water seemed to run perpetually during long, luxurious showers. Food, once carefully portioned for one, vanished from the fridge at an alarming rate, and my pantry, meticulously stocked, was constantly raided and left depleted. "Mom, can you pick up some more organic gluten-free pasta?" And Chloe desperately needs those new earbuds. All her friends have them, she'd casually mention, as if I were her personal concierge. I found myself silently footing the bill for groceries, school supplies, streaming services, and even the occasional expensive gadget for the kids. My pension, once comfortably covering my expenses, was now stretched thinner than a worn-out lace doily. The 6-month mark came and went, completely unacknowledged by Bethany. When I tentatively brought it up during one of our increasingly rare, strained conversations, she waved her hand dismissively. "Oh, Mom, don't even worry about it. I'm this close to closing a deal with a major retailer for my new candle line. It's just taking a little longer than expected with all the paperwork." A little longer turned into a year. Then 18 months. My house was no longer mine. It was theirs. My quiet den, once my private sanctuary for reading and correspondence, became a permanent storage unit for Bethany's unsold candles and artistic supplies. My favorite armchair was buried under a mountain of Liam's discarded sportswear. The rose garden, once my solace, began to languish, its blooms wilting as my energy was consumed by the endless, draining demands within the house. The grandchildren, too, seemed to forget that this wasn't their house. They left their shoes by the front door, tracked mud through the living room, and scratched my prized cherrywood coffee table with their gaming controllers. Attempts to establish basic house rules were met with blank stares from the children and exasperated sighs from Bethany. "Mom, they're just kids. Let them express themselves. You're stifling their creativity." The most insidious change was the subtle shift in Bethany's demeanor. The initial gratitude had evaporated entirely, replaced by a growing sense of entitlement. She started rearranging my kitchen cabinets, moving my cherished china to make room for her mismatched plastic containers. She changed the Wi-Fi password without telling me, claiming it was for network optimization. She even began hosting her friends in my living room, loud, boisterous gatherings that stretched late into the night, forcing me to retreat to my bedroom, a bewildered prisoner in my own home. "This house feels so much more vibrant now, doesn't it, Mom?" she'd exclaim, utterly oblivious to my growing despair. It was so quiet before. Almost desolate. Desolate? I had never felt desolate until they arrived. Now, surrounded by constant noise and chaotic clutter, I felt profoundly alone, a stranger in my own home. My independence, once a source of quiet pride, had been slowly, systematically eroded. I yearned for the silence, the order, the familiar, comforting rhythm of my old life. One afternoon, I found Bethany on the phone in the living room, her voice hushed, almost conspiratorial. I tried not to eavesdrop, but her words drifted clearly through the open door. "No, she barely uses it. Mostly just putters in the garden. She's getting on, you know. Not as sharp as she used to be. It's really too much for her to manage alone." My blood ran cold. She was talking about me. And who was it's too much for her to manage alone? I retreated silently, a cold not forming in my stomach. Something was brewing, something truly sinister. My daughter, the one I had selflessly helped countless times, was discussing me as if I were a burden, a fading relic to be managed. The betrayal stung, sharper and deeper than any financial strain or messy kitchen. The very next morning, I woke to a new, horrifying level of chaos. A large, unfamiliar work truck was parked in my driveway, and two burly men were unloading what looked like heavy construction equipment. I hurried downstairs, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Bethany, what on earth is going on here?" I demanded, my voice trembling with a mixture of fear and outrage. She emerged from the kitchen, a bright, almost triumphant smile plastered across her face. "Oh, Mom. Good, you're up. We're finally getting started on the renovations. It's going to be so much better once it's all open concept, very modern." "Renovations? In my house? Without my knowledge or permission? Renovations for what, Bethany? What are you talking about?" "Well, you know, Mom, the house is a bit dated," she said, waving her hand vaguely, as if describing a dusty antique. "And with all of us here, we really need more functional space. So, I decided to open up the kitchen and knock down that wall into the dining room. It'll be so much more spacious and flow beautifully." My dining room. The room where Arthur and I had hosted countless family dinners, where we had celebrated holidays and quiet anniversaries. The antique dining table, a family heirloom, sat squarely in the middle of it. "You can't just knock down walls," I stammered, aghast, my voice barely a whisper. "This is my house. You didn't even ask me." Her smile faltered slightly, replaced by a look of impatient exasperation. "Mom, don't be so dramatic. It's just a wall. And besides, I've already signed the contract. They start demolition first thing this afternoon." She gestured to the two burly men who were now staring at us, clearly uncomfortable and eager to get to work. A wave of dizziness washed over me, a sickening lurch in my stomach. This wasn't just about messy rooms or high bills. This was about control. About ownership. My daughter was systematically erasing my life, my cherished memories, within the very walls that had sheltered me for decades. She wasn't just a rude, overstaying guest anymore. She was an occupier, a conqueror. And I, Patricia Jenkins, was losing my home, piece by painful piece. I looked around at the growing piles of boxes, the encroaching clutter, the construction workers standing by, tools at the ready. This was no longer just an inconvenience, a temporary familial obligation. This was an outright invasion. And I knew, with chilling, heartbreaking certainty, that the fight for my home, and my very identity, had just begun. But what could a 74-year-old woman do against her own daughter, who seemed utterly consumed by a chilling sense of entitlement and a disturbing lack of empathy? The next morning, the invasion began in earnest. The piercing shriek of a circular saw cutting through drywall, the rhythmic thud of a sledgehammer against studs, the incessant chatter of the construction crew. My house, once a sanctuary of quiet reflection, was now a deafening, dust-choked construction zone. A fine, gritty layer of white dust coated every surface, clinging to my clothes, settling in my lungs, making my throat ache. My beloved antique furniture, hastily covered with flimsy plastic sheets, looked like sad, forgotten ghosts, shrouded in white. Bethany, meanwhile, acted as if she were the visionary architect of a grand estate, barking orders at the workmen, consulting crumpled blueprints she had clearly drawn up without my knowledge, and making enthusiastic pronouncements about the amazing new flow and maximizing natural light. She had even picked out new, ultra-modern light fixtures, sleek, minimalist things that clashed jarringly with every traditional element of my home. "Isn't this exciting, Mom?" she'd shout over the din, her eyes shining with a frightening, almost manic zeal. "Just imagine Christmas dinner in this beautiful open space. So much more room for everyone." Christmas. The thought of her hosting Christmas in my newly gutted dining room, as if it were her own house, as if I were merely a tolerated fixture, sent a wave of cold fury through me. I tried reasoning with her, desperately, calmly, again and again. "Bethany, this is too much. You can't just do this. This is my home. You are a guest here. You have no right." She merely sighed, her patience clearly wearing thin, her eyes rolling with familiar theatricality. "Mom, please. We've been over this. The house is old. It needs updating. And it's for everyone's benefit. You'll love it when it's done. You just don't like change." She spoke to me as if I were a stubborn, senile child, a doddering old woman incapable of grasping her brilliant vision for our future. That night, as I lay in bed, the phantom sounds of construction still echoing in my ears, the dust still tickling my nose, I finally broke. Tears, hot and stinging, streamed down my face, wetting my pillow. I missed Arthur so acutely in that moment, his steady presence, his quiet strength, his unwavering common sense. He would have known what to do. He would never have let this happen. But Arthur wasn't here. It was just me. And I was 74, feeling utterly powerless against the relentless, entitled tide of my own daughter's ambition. The next day, during a brief lull when the workmen were on their lunch break, I ventured into the torn-apart dining room. A gaping, raw hole now stood where the wall had been, exposing jagged studs, dangling wires, and the skeletal remains of what was once a sturdy structure. My grandmother's antique dining table, mercifully, had been moved into the living room, crammed unceremoniously against a wall, covered in a thick layer of drywall dust. As I ran my hand over its smooth, polished surface, a memory surfaced, sharp and vivid, cutting through the haze of my despair. It was a crisp autumn afternoon, decades ago. I was perhaps 8 years old, sitting at this very table, meticulously polishing a small wooden box, a gift from my father. My father, a man of quiet wisdom, unwavering principles, and a deep respect for property and order, sat across from me, a serious, contemplative expression on his face. He was a meticulous craftsman, a clockmaker by trade, a man who believed in precision, structure, and things built to last. "Patricia," he'd said, his voice soft but resonant, "always know what's truly yours. And always, always protect what's yours. Not just your possessions, mind you, but your peace, your space, your dignity. There are some folks in this world, they'll take an inch, and then they'll take a mile. And before you know it, you'll be standing on empty ground, wondering where your life went. Always have your papers in order. Always know your rights. And never, ever let anyone, no matter who they are, make you feel small or unwelcome in your own home." At the time, those words had seemed too profound, too weighty for a child's mind. They'd been lessons in abstract responsibility. But now they echoed in my head, a lifeline thrown to me in a turbulent, dusty sea. Always have your papers in order. Always know your rights. I stood there, the dust motes dancing in the shaft of sunlight from the large bay window, and a spark ignited within me. Not a spark of wild, destructive anger, but of cold, clear, unwavering resolve. My father hadn't been talking about revenge, but about self-preservation, about protecting what was sacred, what was earned. My home was sacred. My peace was sacred. I marched back to my bedroom, pulling out the dusty, heavy metal strongbox from the back of my closet, a relic of Arthur's meticulousness that mirrored my father's own. Inside, meticulously organized, were all my important documents, the original deed to the house, Arthur's will, my own carefully drafted will, insurance policies, bank statements, property tax records. My father, a man who lived by meticulous order and foresight, had ingrained in me the paramount importance of such things. An ounce of prevention, he used to say, his spectacles perched on his nose, is worth a pound of cure, Patricia. As I reviewed the deed, something in my father's words clicked into place with startling clarity. This house was unequivocally mine. Not Bethany's. Not Liam's or Chloe's. Mine. And a guest, no matter how long they stayed or how entitled they felt, had absolutely no legal right to make structural changes without the owner's explicit, written consent. My father's words, a quiet whisper from the past, became my anchor, my guiding star. The next morning, I confronted Bethany again, but this time, my voice was steady, infused with a newfound, chilling calm. "Bethany," I said, holding up the original deed, the parchment crisp in my trembling hand, "this house is solely in my name. You have no legal right whatsoever to make any alterations to it without my explicit written permission. And you do not have my permission." She scoffed, a dismissive wave of her hand, a familiar theatrical gesture. "Mom, don't be ridiculous. I live here now. And it's not like you're going to live forever. Eventually, it will be mine anyway. You're just being old-fashioned." The casual cruelty of her words, the blatant disregard for my existence, for my very mortality, landed like a physical blow. "Eventually," she'd said, as if she were merely biding her time until I was gone, until she could sweep in and claim what she perceived as hers. "That is neither here nor there, Bethany," I replied, forcing my voice to remain even, despite the tremor that ran through me. "For now, it is my home. And these renovations stop. Immediately." "No, they don't," she retorted, her eyes narrowing, a dangerous glint in them. "I've paid the deposit. I've signed the contracts. You can't stop me. It's already started." "Oh, but I can," I said, a dangerous calm settling over me, a calm that surprised even myself. "I can call the city. I can report unauthorized construction. I can report a guest who is deliberately destroying my property. Do you really want to explain to zoning officials why you're knocking down walls in a house you don't legally own? Or to the police why you're refusing to leave when I ask you to? Because I assure you, Bethany, I will. And they will listen to the homeowner." Her confident facade wavered. The mention of city officials, police, and legal consequences seemed to hit a nerve, piercing through her bubble of entitlement. For a moment, she looked genuinely worried, her mouth opening and closing soundlessly like a fish out of water. "You wouldn't dare," she finally whispered, her voice laced with disbelief, a hint of genuine fear. "Try me," I replied, my gaze unwavering, my eyes fixed firmly on hers. She glared at me, her face contorted in a mix of fury and something akin to a childish tantrum. "Fine. Fine, you old battle axe. But don't come crying to me when this place falls apart because you refuse to modernize it." With that, she stormed off, slamming her bedroom door with a force that rattled the very foundations of the house, a testament to her fury. The construction stopped for now. The workmen, clearly confused by the sudden halt, packed up their tools, exchanging curious glances with me. I watched them go, a small, weary victory stirring within me, a flicker of hope. It wasn't over, not by a long shot. But I had drawn a line in the sand. And for the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of my old self, the woman who had faced life's challenges head-on, with quiet determination. But Bethany wasn't one to give up easily. A few days later, a formal-looking envelope arrived in the mail, addressed to me. My heart sank as I saw the distinctive letterhead of a law firm I didn't recognize. Inside was a neatly typed letter, a formal eviction notice. "Notice to vacate," the bold heading declared in stark, official type. It stated, with chilling formality, that Bethany, as a tenant at will, was exercising her right to take possession of the property, and that I, Patricia Jenkins, the previous occupant, had a mere 30 days to vacate. It was signed by a lawyer I didn't recognize, and below her signature, in Bethany's familiar, looping handwriting, was a smug, handwritten note. "See, Mom? I told you this house would be mine. You should have just let me renovate. Now look what you've done. You brought this on yourself." My hands trembled as I reread the letter, the paper rustling softly. Tenant at will? Previous occupant? My own daughter was trying to evict me from my own home. The audacity, the sheer, breathtaking gall of it, was almost comical if it weren't so deeply, profoundly hurtful. The betrayal, this time, was complete and chilling to the bone. A cold, steely rage, unlike anything I had ever felt, settled in my chest, replacing the familiar ache of sorrow. This wasn't just about a house anymore. This was about principle, about respect, about a lifetime of quiet sacrifices, of giving and nurturing, thrown back in my face with a cruel, entitled smirk. My father's words echoed again, louder this time, always protect what's yours. This wasn't just my house, it was my legacy, my sanity, my very identity. I thought about calling my friends, my neighbors, my other, more sensible daughter, anyone who might offer comfort or advice. But something held me back. This was my fight. And I had a distinct feeling that revealing the true depths of my daughter's depravity would only bring me shame, not solace. I had to handle this. Alone. On my terms. I spent the next few days in a haze of disbelief and frantic, determined research. I called a legal aid hotline specifically for seniors, explaining my predicament in a carefully neutral, almost detached tone. The kind, patient voice on the other end calmly explained the basics of tenant-landlord law, which, as I suspected, overwhelmingly favored the actual property owner, me. Bethany had no legal standing whatsoever. The letter was a brazen bluff, an empty intimidation tactic designed to scare me into submission. But the incident, though a bluff, hardened my resolve. This wasn't just about winning, it was about teaching Bethany a profound, undeniable lesson, a lesson about respect, about consequences, and about the fundamental difference between genuine generosity and rampant, self-serving entitlement. I decided to start with something small, something that would send a clear, undeniable message, a subtle shift in the power dynamic. Bethany loved her daily, elaborate latte from the expensive coffee shop downtown. Every morning, she would casually, almost imperceptibly, hold out her hand or make a vague comment about needing coffee money. I had always given it, along with a silent sigh of resignation. The next morning, as she held out her hand, a sweet, innocent smile plastered on her face, I looked at her, my expression unreadable, my eyes calm but firm. "Oh, I'm terribly sorry, dear," I said, a slight, almost imperceptible tremor in my voice, but a steel resolve in my eyes. I seem to have run completely out of cash. And my pension just about covers my own needs these days, especially with all the extra utility usage we've been having. Her smile vanished, replaced by a look of bewildered shock. "What? You don't have any cash? Mom, seriously? Just use your card then." "My card is for my groceries and my own bills," I replied calmly, my gaze unwavering. "Not for your lattes. Perhaps it's time you started budgeting for your own treats, especially if you're going to live here for free. After all, you're looking for work, aren't you?" She stared at me, dumbfounded, as if I had suddenly transformed into a stranger. You're serious? You're cutting me off? For coffee? "I'm merely reminding you of the understanding we had, Bethany," I said, my voice gentle but firm as tempered steel. "You're here temporarily while you find work. You are not a permanent resident, and you are responsible for your own personal expenses. That was always the agreement." She stormed off, muttering incoherently under her breath about ridiculous old women and penny pinching, but I noticed her absence later that morning. No expensive latte. It was a tiny victory, almost insignificant in the grand scheme of things, but it was a start. A small, almost imperceptible chip in her impenetrable wall of entitlement. Over the next few weeks, I began to subtly, systematically reclaim my space. I started locking my bedroom door at night, a small, symbolic act of defiance that restored a sliver of my privacy. I painstakingly moved my grandmother's table back into the dining room, pushing the remnants of construction debris to the side, a clear declaration that the renovations were indeed halted. I began to spend more time in the living room during the day, conspicuously reading my books, knitting, listening to classical music, making it unequivocally clear that it was my space, not a communal area for her friends. If Bethany had friends over, I would simply sit there, knitting, my presence a quiet, undeniable, and rather uncomfortable reminder of who truly owned the house. These small, quiet acts of defiance, however, only fueled Bethany's simmering resentment. She grew colder, more distant, her eyes filled with a brooding, unspoken anger. The children, sensing the escalating tension, became more withdrawn, or, conversely, more disruptive, acting out their mother's unspoken frustrations in increasingly exasperating ways. Then, one evening, as I was preparing a simple, solitary dinner for myself, Bethany and the kids often ate out or ordered in, leaving me to my increasingly quiet meals. Bethany walked into the kitchen, a predatory, almost triumphant gleam in her eyes, a look I had never seen directed at me before. "Mom," she began, her voice falsely sweet, dripping with a saccharine tone that set my teeth on edge. "I've been talking to a real estate agent, and they said this house would be worth so much more if it were completely modernized. We could get at least double what it's worth now if we just finish the renovations and put it on the market." I stopped chopping vegetables, my knife poised midair, a perfectly ripe tomato threatening to roll off the cutting board. "On the market?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper, a cold dread creeping up my spine. "What are you talking about, Bethany?" "Well," she continued, utterly oblivious to the horror spreading across my face, "since you're getting on in years and you're alone, it just makes perfect sense to sell this big old house. It's too much for you to manage. We could sell it, split the money, at a nice, even 50-50 split, and you could move into a lovely, small apartment. Maybe even one of those nice senior living communities. It would be so much easier for you, less stress." The air left my lungs in a whoosh, as if I had been punched. Sell my home? My sanctuary? The place where Arthur and I had built our entire life together? Where I had raised my children, including her? And split the money? It was brazen, audacious, and utterly, heartbreakingly cruel. She wasn't just trying to evict me, she was trying to strip me of everything, to make me utterly dependent, to erase me from the very narrative of my own life. My father's face, stern and loving, flashed before my eyes, his words echoing with a new, profound urgency. "Always know what's yours. Always protect what's yours." "Get out," I said, my voice a low, dangerous rumble, barely recognizable as my own, filled with an ancient fury. Bethany flinched, startled, her composure finally breaking. "Mom? What's wrong with you? What are you saying?" "Get out of my kitchen," I repeated, my gaze fixed on her, unwavering, my eyes burning with a righteous indignation. "Get out of my house. And don't you ever speak to me about selling my home again. Not a single word. Do you understand?" She stared at me, a flicker of genuine fear in her eyes, mixed with bewildered rage. She hadn't expected this. She had expected passive compliance, a meek surrender, perhaps a few tears. But she was met with a steel she hadn't known I possessed, a strength forged in decades of quiet resilience and unshakable principle. She backed away slowly, her face pale, her usual bravado utterly deflated. "You'll regret this, Mom," she hissed, before turning on her heel and retreating to her room, the slamming door echoing like a final, desperate gunshot in the quiet of my kitchen. I stood in the sudden silence of my kitchen, my hands still gripping the knife, the untouched tomato, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. This was it. The ultimate challenge. My daughter was not just a guest who had overstayed her welcome. She was actively, maliciously trying to dispossess me, to steal my very roots. But she had made one critical, unforgivable mistake. She had underestimated the quiet resilience of a woman who had spent a lifetime building, nurturing, and protecting. She had forgotten the enduring power of the lessons passed down through generations. And she was about to learn that an old woman with nothing left to lose was the most dangerous adversary of all. Day after Bethany's audacious proposal to sell my house, the atmosphere in my home transformed from merely tense to palpably hostile, thick with unspoken accusations and simmering resentment. Bethany barely spoke to me, communicating only through clipped, cold sentences directed at the children, or through exaggerated sighs and disdainful eye rolls whenever I entered a room. The children, caught in the unbearable crossfire, mostly retreated to their rooms, emerging only for food or to whisper requests for things their mother had explicitly forbidden them from having. But I wasn't just sitting idle, stewing in my justifiable anger. My father's words resonated more clearly than ever in my mind, a steady drumbeat of wisdom: always have your papers in order. Always know your rights. The sham eviction notice, flimsy and legally baseless as it was, had been a crucial wake-up call. It had jolted me out of my passive acceptance and into decisive action. I revisited the legal aid hotline, this time with a clear, specific question. What are my options for legally removing someone who refuses to leave my property, even after being given a written notice and attempting to assert false ownership? The kind, patient lawyer on the phone patiently explained the process of unlawful detainer, essentially a legal eviction, but one initiated by the rightful property owner. It was a formal, potentially drawn-out process involving court filings, hearings, and, potentially, sheriff involvement. The thought of taking my own daughter to court filled me with a deep, aching sadness. But the alternative, losing my home, my independence, my very identity, was infinitely worse. As I began to gather the necessary documents for the unlawful detainer filing, another, more strategic thought struck me. Bethany had been so quick to claim tenant-at-will status when it suited her, when she thought it would help her illegally seize my home. But if she was a tenant, even an informal one, then she had responsibilities. And she had spectacularly failed to uphold every single one of them. I meticulously reviewed my bank statements, cross-referencing them with the dates Bethany and the children had moved in. I calculated every single extra expense she had incurred: the inflated utility bills, the skyrocketing grocery costs, the casual loans for emergencies that were never, ever repaid. I even included the conservative cost of replacing the antique coffee table, which had been permanently scarred by Liam's careless gaming, and the estimated cost of repainting the walls where Chloe had accidentally drawn with permanent markers. It was a staggering sum, far more than I had anticipated, a shocking testament to her financial recklessness. But the financial aspect was only part of it. The emotional toll, the profound loss of my peace of mind, the constant anxiety, the feeling of being a prisoner in my own home. How could I possibly put a price on that? I couldn't. But I could ensure that Bethany faced the full weight of her actions, not just legally, but morally, a reckoning she had clearly never considered. I knew that a direct, aggressive, screaming confrontation would only make Bethany dig in her heels even further. She thrived on drama, on playing the victim, on turning every argument into a spectacle. No, this had to be subtle, strategic, and utterly undeniable. The retribution couldn't be physical or loud. It had to be quiet, logical, devastatingly effective, and delivered with the precision of a well-placed chess move. My mind went back to my father. He wasn't just a meticulous clockmaker. He was a master chess player, a quiet strategist who spent hours contemplating every move. He always taught me that the best moves were the ones your opponent never saw coming, the ones that quietly undermined their position, piece by painful piece, until they had nowhere left to move, no escape. I decided to play chess. My first move was to formally send Bethany a notice to pay rent or quit. I consulted online legal resources and, with the guidance of the Legal Aid Service, drafted a professional-looking document, cold and formal, stating a reasonable monthly rent based on current market value for a house of this size, backdated to the very first day she moved in, minus the few minor, almost symbolic contributions she had made in the very beginning. I listed the total amount owed, clearly outlining the exact period it covered. The notice also stated, in no uncertain terms, that if the full amount wasn't paid within 5 days, she would be considered an irrefutable breach of her informal tenancy agreement and would face immediate legal eviction proceedings. I sent it via certified mail, requiring a signature, ensuring she couldn't claim she never received it. When Bethany received the ominous letter, her furious call vibrated through my phone, echoing through the quiet house. "Mom, what is this? Rent. You're actually making me pay rent in your own house. This is absolutely outrageous. You said I could stay here for free. You promised." Her voice was shrill, laced with a familiar mix of indignation and self-pity. "I said you could stay temporarily, while you found work, Bethany," I replied calmly, my voice steady, betraying none of the satisfaction I felt. "And you have not found work. Furthermore, you have incurred significant expenses, damaged my property, and now you're brazenly attempting to evict me from my own home. This notice simply formalizes our arrangement, as you yourself suggested by claiming to be a tenant at will. You are either a grateful guest, in which case you must abide by my rules, or you are a tenant, in which case you must pay rent. Which is it, Bethany? Make your choice." She sputtered, speechless for a full, glorious minute. "I'm not paying you a single dime. You can't make me. This is extortion." "Then you have exactly 5 days to vacate the premises, Bethany," I said, a hint of steel in my voice that was almost imperceptible, but utterly unshakable. "Otherwise, I will proceed with full legal action, which will include a claim for all overdue rent, the cost of all damages, and every legal fee incurred. And that, Bethany, will be a matter of public record, for everyone to see." The mention of public record seemed to sting. Bethany, despite her chaotic life, was acutely aware of appearances, always keen to project an image of success and respectability, even if it was a carefully constructed facade. But her stubborn pride wouldn't let her back down easily. Over the next few days, Bethany intensified her passive-aggressive tactics. She deliberately left lights on all night, cranked the heating to an unbearable, stifling temperature, and left food festering on counters, attracting ants. The children, taking their cue from her, became more defiant, refusing to do even the simplest chores, leaving even bigger messes in their wake. It was a childish war of attrition, designed to make my life so miserable that I would relent, desperate for peace. But I had anticipated this. My father had taught me patience, the importance of playing the long game, of weathering the storm with quiet fortitude. I documented everything, the precise dates and times of the utility waste, the estimated cost of the spoiled food, the new damage to the house, no matter how small. I even installed a small, discreet security camera in the living room, ostensibly for peace of mind, but primarily to document any further deliberate destruction or misconduct. On the 6th day, the rent money was, predictably, not deposited into my account. Instead, I received another, thicker legal letter from Bethany's lawyer, this time threatening to sue me for elder abuse and emotional distress, claiming I was financially exploiting my own daughter and grandchildren. I read the letter with a wry, almost amused smile. Bethany was truly desperate. She was flailing, reaching for anything she could grasp. But this, I realized with a surge of grim satisfaction, was exactly what I needed. It gave me the perfect leverage to play my next, decisive move. I contacted a highly reputable law firm in the city, one specializing in property law and elder rights. I laid out my entire case, calmly and methodically, presenting them with every single piece of documentation I had meticulously gathered, the original informal agreement, the escalating expenses, the blatant illegal eviction notice from Bethany, the irrefutable proof of unauthorized renovations, and finally, her lawyer's baseless, inflammatory threats. The lawyer, a sharp, empathetic woman named Ms. Eleanor Vance, a coincidence that made me smile, given my previous musings, listened intently, nodding occasionally, her expression growing increasingly serious. "Mrs. Jenkins," she said, once I had finished my detailed account, "your daughter has absolutely no legal standing whatsoever. In fact, her actions are not just egregious, they are bordering on elder exploitation and attempted illegal eviction. We can file an unlawful detainer suit immediately. And given her ridiculous threat of elder abuse, we can most certainly countersue for defamation and frivolous litigation. We can also seek full reimbursement for all expenses, damages, and even punitive damages, given the malicious nature of her actions." My heart pounded with a mix of immense relief and grim, unyielding satisfaction. "What are the chances of success, Ms. Vance?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. 100%, Mrs. Jenkins," she replied, her voice firm, unwavering. The law, in this case, is unequivocally on your side. She has no leg to stand on. I authorized Ms. Vance to proceed with the full force of the law. The very next week, Bethany received the formal court summons. It wasn't just an unlawful detainer notice, it was a comprehensive, multi-page lawsuit detailing all the expenses she owed, the exact cost of the damages to the house, and the powerful counterclaim for defamation and frivolous litigation. It was a thick, intimidating packet of official documents, each page outlining her transgressions, meticulously backed by my unassailable records and irrefutable evidence. The silence that descended upon my house was deafening, chilling. Bethany, for the first time since she had moved in, seemed truly stunned, utterly blindsided. Her usual bluster completely evaporated, replaced by a panicked, bewildered expression, as if she had suddenly woken up in a nightmare. The sheer weight of the legal paperwork, the official stamps, the stern, undeniable language of the court, it finally seemed to register, piercing through her bubble of self-delusion. This wasn't just Mom being stubborn. This was real. This was serious. This was the law. She called her lawyer, her voice hushed, her usual theatricality replaced by genuine, unadulterated fear. I heard snippets of her conversation through the thin walls of her room. Defamation? Illegal eviction? No, I didn't think she would actually. It's Mom, for heaven's sake. It's just a coffee table. She's overreacting. The lawyer, I assumed, was explaining the grim, inescapable reality. Bethany had overplayed her hand, had taken a mile when offered an inch, and was now facing a legal reckoning far beyond anything she had anticipated, a consequence she had never dreamed possible. 2 days later, Bethany knocked tentatively on my bedroom door. Her face was pale, her eyes red-rimmed and swollen. She no longer carried herself with her usual arrogant swagger. She looked small, utterly defeated, utterly lost. "Mom," she began, her voice barely a whisper, thin and reedy, "can we please talk?" I opened the door fully, but remained standing, my arms crossed over my chest, my posture unyielding. "What is there to talk about, Bethany?" "The lawsuit," she said, her gaze darting frantically around the room, avoiding my steady, unwavering eyes. "My lawyer said, she said it's really serious. She said you could win everything. And that I could owe you an enormous amount of money. And my reputation." "That's correct," I replied, my voice devoid of emotion, like a judge delivering a verdict. "You owe me what you have taken, Bethany. Nothing more, nothing less. And you have taken quite a lot. But, Mom, I'm your daughter," she wailed, tears finally welling in her eyes, thick and fast. "How could you do this to me? How could you ruin my life? How could you do this to me, Bethany?" I countered, my voice rising slightly, imbued with the weight of years of unspoken hurt. "How could you try to evict your own mother from her home? How could you lie, exploit, and disrespect the very person who has always been there for you, who has always picked you up when you fell? I offered you shelter, and you tried to take everything. You tried to erase me." Her shoulders slumped, her resistance finally broken. She truly had no answer, no excuse, no flimsy justification left. The facade of entitlement had utterly crumbled, revealing the desperate, irresponsible, utterly lost young woman beneath. "What do you want?" she finally asked, her voice cracking, barely audible. "I want my peace back, Bethany," I said, my gaze softening slightly, but my resolve remaining firm as bedrock. "I want my home back. And I want you to truly understand the consequences of your actions. Not just legally, but morally. I want you to learn what you have done." We reached an agreement, mediated through our respective lawyers, just 2 days before the scheduled court date. Bethany, facing overwhelming legal evidence and the humiliating prospect of a public trial that would expose every facet of her abhorrent behavior, finally, truly capitulated. She agreed to vacate my home within 48 hours, with her children and all her belongings, leaving not a single trace behind. She agreed to pay back a substantial portion of the expenses incurred, in manageable monthly installments, once she secured stable employment, a detail my lawyer insisted upon. Crucially, She agreed to sign a legally binding document relinquishing any and all future claims to my property and unequivocally acknowledging that her previous eviction notice was baseless, malicious, and entirely without legal merit. And the ridiculous elder abuse and emotional distress claims were dropped with prejudice, never to be raised again. It wasn't about the money, not entirely. It was about the principle. About Bethany finally facing the painful, undeniable consequences of her actions. About justice, quiet and undeniable, delivered not with a shout, but with the steady, methodical precision of a ticking clock. The day she left was surprisingly quiet, almost anticlimactic. The professional movers she hired worked quickly, efficiently, packing her remaining boxes, dismantling the children's beds. I watched from the living room, a strange, complex mix of profound sorrow and immense relief swirling within me. Liam and Chloe came to hug me goodbye, their young faces etched with confusion and a nascent sadness. I hugged them tightly, whispering that I loved them fiercely and would always be there for them, truly. Bethany, however, avoided my gaze, her face set in a stony, unreadable mask of shame, resentment, and, perhaps, a tiny flicker of nascent understanding. She left without a single word, without a single glance back, disappearing in the wake of the moving van. As the last moving truck pulled out of my driveway, kicking up a small cloud of dust, a profound, almost spiritual silence descended upon my house. The dust motes still danced in the afternoon light, but now the very air felt lighter, cleaner, purified. The lingering scent of her cloying perfume, of children's sugary snacks, slowly began to dissipate, replaced by the faint, comforting aroma of my roses drifting in through the open window. I walked through the house, room by quiet room. The dining room, still gutted and raw, looked forlorn, but it was my forlorn dining room. The faint scratches on the cherry-wood coffee table were still there, a tangible reminder, but they were now a testament to a battle fiercely fought and unequivocally won, not a symbol of ongoing violation. I stood in the center of my living room, the profound quiet enveloping me, a deep, cleansing sense of peace washing over me, settling into my very bones. It was truly over. My home was mine again. My sanctuary was gloriously restored. In the weeks that followed, I had the house professionally cleaned, every speck of the dust of the invasion meticulously removed. I hired a trusted local contractor to repair the dining room wall, restoring it to its former glory, the new plaster smooth and unmarked. I painstakingly replanted my garden, nurturing the roses back to vibrant health, their abundant, colorful blooms a beautiful, living symbol of renewed hope and resilience. I didn't hear from Bethany for several months. Then, one day, a small, unassuming envelope arrived. Inside was a money order for the first installment of what she owed me and a short, almost illegible note, written on plain paper. "Mom," it read in a shaky hand, "I got a job. It's not much, but it's something. And I guess I understand now. I'm truly sorry." It wasn't a full apology, not yet. There was still a long road for her to travel, a deep well of self-reflection to draw from. But it was a start. A small, significant crack in the impenetrable wall of her denial. Perhaps, in time, she would truly understand the depth of her actions and the immense value of what she had almost irrevocably destroyed. My father's lesson, imparted all those years ago at my grandmother's solid dining table, had saved me. It wasn't about being cruel or vengeful or even loud. It was about recognizing danger, understanding my fundamental rights, and having the quiet, unshakable courage to protect myself, my home, and my dignity, no matter the cost. It was a profound lesson about knowing what was truly yours, not just material possessions, but peace of mind, self-respect, and the inviolable sanctity of your own space. My life returned to its quiet, predictable, and profoundly satisfying rhythm. I spent my days in the garden, lost myself in the pages of books, and continued my volunteer work at the library, surrounded by the comforting scent of old paper and quiet whispers. The house, once a battlefield, was now filled with a deep, comforting silence and echoing peace. My heart, once heavy with dread and sorrow, was now lighter, filled with a quiet triumph and a renewed sense of purpose. I had faced a formidable, heart-wrenching challenge, one that threatened to unravel the very fabric of my life. And I, Patricia Jenkins, a 74-year-old woman, had stood my ground. I had protected what was mine, not with aggression, but with quiet wisdom and unwavering resolve. And in doing so, I had not only saved my cherished home, but had truly rediscovered the profound strength, resilience, and unshakable spirit that lay deep within myself. I knew that whatever challenges life might throw my way in the years to come, I would face them, armed with the enduring wisdom of my past and the unwavering resolve to protect my hard-won peace. And that, I realized, was the greatest inheritance of all.